Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in every single week, as most of you hopefully do. Our website, as always, is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. On today's show, we'll be talking about the issue of our time, Gaza, which somehow keeps getting even more dire, which is hard to fathom, but it's true. In the midst now of a full-blown starvation siege imposed by Israel on the people of Gaza, which, as we're recording this, has no signs of letting up.
Yeah. And, just like random aside, do you know anyone who has Israeli flags in their social media profile pics?
In my no, I don't.
I keep seeing these people who I'm not that close with, but they're like friends of friends or friends of friends of friends, and they have Israeli flags in their profile pics. And I can't get over that they're not embarrassed to have them. Like, even if they're cheering for Israel, these are people who are other, they're PEPs. I don't know if they're progressive except on Palestine, but they're LEPs, let's say. They're liberal except on Palestine. And I'm just wondering if you're out there and you consider yourself like a Democrat or a liberal. I mean, we know that the Democrats are genocidal, but like, what would Israel have to do, my people out there who claim to dislike Netanyahu? What would Israel have to do for you to remove their flag from your profile pic?
Well, obviously not impose a starvation siege on 2 million desperate people. That certainly isn't too much for Israel supporters.
Yeah.
And in fact, it is, though, for some Democrats, and let's get to that. Democrats suck. Finally, after, more than a year and a half of mass murder, we're going almost 2 years, some Democrats now finally are speaking out. For example, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Humanitarian aid must immediately reach the civilian population in Gaza. As one pediatric doctor, the leader of the ward at Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza, said, "There is no one in Gaza now outside the scope of famine, not even myself." This is the pediatrician who leads the ward. He says, "I am speaking to you as a health official, but I too am searching for flour to feed my family." As the New York Times notes, the World Food Program, an arm of the United Nations, said this week that the hunger crisis in Gaza has reached, in their words, new and astonishing levels of desperation, with 1/3, that's right, 1/3 of the population now eating for multiple days in a row.
Not eating, she means.
Yeah, not eating for multiple days in a row. Okay, so look, I welcome anyone speaking out. That's a positive thing, and we need even more of it. We need concrete action, for example, not just talk. But I mean, the one issue here that people like Amy Klobuchar have to face is that they've been cheering on Israel's mass murder campaign for a long time, both under Biden and now under Trump. And Adam Johnson points this out specifically of Amy Klobuchar. "My sister in Christ, you took a smiling photo with Netanyahu exactly 2 weeks ago." And that's correct. Amy Klobuchar, let's look at that photo, was among a number of senators, Democrats and Republicans. There she is near the left side of the screen with Netanyahu.
Schumer, we got Schumer also, yeah.
Schumer, and you also have Cory Booker in there, who's kind of hiding in the back. You can see there, Cory Booker on the right of your screen. He's hiding right behind Chris Coons, who's proud to be there with Netanyahu. So, I mean, these are people who cheered on the destruction of Gaza, who cheered on Israel's dismantling of UNRWA, the main UN refugee agency working in Gaza, who enabled all these horrific crimes. And it's now they're reaching the moment where finally they're claiming to be against it. There's a book about this. It's called One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This.
Yeah.
And this is that moment right now, finally.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm glad. Yeah, it's hard to be. It's both. I don't even know if it's infuriating. It's infuriating. Like, you want to see some movement, so that's good. But it is infuriating because not only were they not saying anything before, but they were okay with it enough to pose for a photo with this genocidal monster. And everyone knows that he's not just genocidal for genocide's sake, which is I don't actually know which is worse, but he's doing this for he needs to keep the war going. I mean, it's both things. He's an ideological, genocidal Zionist, and also he needs to cover his ass and not get himself in trouble for corruption. And everyone knows that, including Joe Biden.
All right, here's a bonus Democrats suck, and it's about Russiagate. And for people who are tired of Russiagate, I understand. It is an old story, and there are a lot of more important things going on right now. But I do want to tie it actually to the issue of our time, which is the Holocaust in Gaza, because Democrats spent years claiming that Trump was doing the bidding of a foreign power, Russia, rather than doing the bidding of another foreign power, which he's actually done since first taking office, which is Israel. He colluded with Israel after being elected in 2016 when he tried to undermine a vote at the UN that was criticizing Israeli settlements. And he's done Israel's bidding ever since. And Democrats were so obsessed with their dumb conspiracy theory that Trump and Russia were in cahoots that they ignored his actual collusion with the foreign power. So that's why actually Russiagate, even if you don't care about it, still has relevance, because Democrats forced their base into focusing on the wrong foreign power. It wasn't Russia that Trump has been working on behalf of. It's been Israel all along. Well, and someone who's played a major role in that is Adam Schiff. Now, remember Adam Schiff? He pushed Russiagate more than any other Democrat. He constantly claimed to have evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And now he's being newly embarrassed because more documents are being released by the Trump administration showing what a scam Russiagate was on all aspects, not just the collusion aspect, but also Russian interference. Finally, we're getting some declassification of documents. Now, people are saying about the Trump administration that they're only doing this to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein controversy, which Trump is very much implicated in. And I agree with that. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden now we're getting this new wave of declassification right now as Trump is facing a lot of heat over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein and going back on the promises by some of his top officials that there was going to be transparency. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're getting declassification on Russiagate now, but that doesn't negate the fact that in these declassified documents, there's a lot of really important material that confirms what those of us skeptics have been saying all along. This thing was a scam. And someone who was a major part of that scam is Adam Schiff. And here he is being confronted about the newly released documents and what they show about the scam he pushed.
Senator, question for you. Should Obama and his team be held responsible in some way for pushing the Russia collusion narrative that was proven false to take down Trump?
Well, if you read the Mueller report, Intelligence Community report, you know they documented Russia's efforts to help denigrate Hillary Clinton, which gave a boost to the Trump campaign. And I think what Gabbard and her staff are doing is dishonest and misleading. And I'll leave it with that.
Do you owe an apology at all, though, on what you were saying during this whole thing? It was proven false?
Been proven accurate.
Everything you've been saying is accurate about Russia collusion?
Okay, so that's Adam Schiff claiming that everything he said has been proven accurate. But notice, though, in that clip, he doesn't say anything about collusion between Trump and Russia, right? He just says that Russia tried to help Trump, which, again, if you look at the actual evidence, as I have, there's a lot of fraud there even behind that claim. But notice how he's not saying that Trump and Russia colluded, okay? And then he says everything I've said has been proven accurate. Well, what he was saying all along was that Trump and Russia colluded. This is just a supercut of some of what Adam Schiff pushed for years and years and years.
The Russians offered help, which we know they did. The campaign accepted help, which we know they did. The Russians then delivered help, which we know they did.
There is circumstantial evidence of collusion.
The case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So,
you've said on more than one occasion that you've seen ample evidence of the Trump campaign's Russia collusion. Last March, you said you had more than circumstantial evidence of treasonous collusion with Russia.
I've certainly said that there's ample evidence of collusion.
Can you agree that there has been no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy?
Wow, Margaret Brennan, I almost didn't recognize her hair much longer. Okay.
That has been presented thus far between the Trump campaign and Russia?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy.
All right, so you get the picture. This is what he said constantly for years and years and years. And he was the Pied Piper of Russiagate. Everybody followed his lead. Now he's not even saying any more collusion because he knows that that's a complete scam. By the way, it's funny that like The View, Meghan McCain did like better journalism on this than most actual journalists. But look, this was a disaster. And yes, the Trump administration is using this now to deflect from the heat they're facing over, all their many broken promises and the very actual real controversy over Trump and Epstein, where I do think Trump has something to hide, unlike the fake Russia conspiracy. Just because there's a political motive behind these disclosures doesn't mean they're not important. And,
Exactly, right.
Personally, I'm happy to see it because I'm only just being newly confirmed with everything I said for so many years.
Aaron, want to hear something creepy? I just looked up our names on Google and found way too much information about our addresses, phone numbers, and personal data. I looked up some friends too, and everything about them is so easy to find with a quick search. I've started talking with our latest sponsor, Aura, which explains that there are companies called data brokers that sell your data. They do it without your consent, and they make billions of dollars selling it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers. And while they're legally required to remove your info if you ask, they make the process confusing and hard on purpose. Aura does the hard part, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. Aura is all-in-one digital security. You may already have a digital security tool, but not having Aura is like locking the front door but leaving the back door open. Get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web, real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, and 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/usefulidiots. In those 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. So for Republican suck, as many people know, Donald Trump ran promising to uncover the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. He promised that he would release an Epstein list. And now that he's president, lo and behold, he isn't doing that. So in response to that, you have Ruben Gallego, congressman of Arizona, who introduced a resolution that would order the release of Epstein files. And in response to that, you had a Republican of Oklahoma, Mark Wayne Mullen, and here he is blocking said resolution. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I'm sure this would be handled just like any other thing that they've tried to go after, like the baseless impeachments or the baseless special counsels or the unbelievable amount of charges they've tried to file against the president. I'm sure this would be handled the exact same way. What we're simply wanting to do here is give them cover.
What we're simply trying to do here is give Trump cover. I think that's an honest statement. And
it is.
Yeah, listen, I'm not one to dismiss all the other lawfare attempts against Trump. I do think they were overblown. I've been calling out the Russia collusion scams since day one. But I'm sorry. Look, you guys made your bed. You guys hyped up the Epstein thing.
Yeah.
A lot of top Trump influencers did. And Trump clearly does not want it to come out. That's very, very obvious. Because unlike, all the fantasies about him being in cahoots with Russia, he was in cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein. They were friends.
Right. Yeah.
And Trump is an admitted sexual predator. He's bragged about it. He bragged about it in the Access Hollywood tape. And then he bragged about it in a deposition where, he was like, they're asking about his grab women by the genitals comment. And he's like, yeah, well, that's how it is. That's how stars can do that. Unfortunately or fortunately. So he wouldn't even pretend to apologize for being an admitted sexual predator. So he's getting what he bargained for in hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And letting his influencers try to run on transparency over Jeffrey Epstein when he really wants to cover it up.
Right. He's getting he's getting his just desserts, I guess, right? Because he was an Epstein friend, but also because he then promised that he was going to drain the swamp and expose the truth about Epstein. And this is just one more example of Trump being a status quo president, being part of the deep state, basically, that he claims to want to blow up. So in response to that, the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act was introduced by Congressman Thomas Massie and Congressman Ro Khanna. And that would have required the release of the Epstein files. So what happens in response to that? Well, interestingly enough, House Speaker Mike Johnson decided to split for summer vacation early. And in doing so, he canceled the last day of votes until Congress returns from break, meaning the vote would be delayed to sometime in September, most likely. So here is Speaker Johnson trying to defend his actions.
We all understand that the America First agenda and the American people are best served by putting an end to the Democrats' sideshows. And that's what we're doing by not allowing the Rules Committee to continue with that nonsense this week. As was noted, we've got tons of very important work going on here. The leader just gave you a small sampling of it. But we're done being lectured on transparency by the same party that orchestrated one of the most shameless, dangerous political cover-ups in the history of this country.
There you go. He's done being lectured. He's tired of being lectured about transparency. I would be tired of that too if I was doing my best to obscure things as opposed to being transparent. And here is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar with a kind of very authentic reaction to this announcement.
Hey y'all, we're at the Education and Workforce Committee, and we were supposed to vote on a bill to address human and sex trafficking, but they just canceled committee because we had an amendment to address the Epstein files. So I told you all the protection for the pedophile party is at it again.
So there you have it. Republicans do indeed suck.
They certainly suck at transparency on Jeffrey Epstein after promising it to get elected. They certainly are failing in that. And I got to say, it's pretty entertaining. You know, when you hype up a controversy and you convince people that there's a big cover up of like a massive pedophile blackmail ring, and you come off and say, hey, move on. There's nothing to see here. People are going to ask questions. And I don't think this controversy is going away. And even though I don't think that there's evidence to show that Epstein was a part of some like Mossad blackmail ring, I do love the fact that this is bringing new scrutiny on Israel, because it's totally plausible. I totally understand why people think Israel will be doing something like that, right? Because Israel, as we're seeing now in Gaza, to me is the embodiment of evil. So yeah, I welcome whatever can bring more scrutiny on Israel and Washington. If Jeffrey Epstein is what it takes, hey, I'm all for it.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Okay, for Isn't That Weird, let's turn to AOC and how she handled criticism of a recent vote that she cast against an amendment from Marjorie Taylor Greene that would have cut $500 million in funding to Israel for its so-called Iron Dome. And this is what AOC said in response to her vote against that measure that would cut $500 million in aid to Israel. Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment does nothing to cut off offensive aid to Israel, nor end the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza. Of course, I voted against it. What it does do is cut off defensive Iron Dome capacities while allowing the actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. And just moving a little bit ahead, she says, I remain focused on cutting the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate the genocide in Gaza. So there's just something really incoherent here. On the one hand, you're accusing Israel accurately of a genocide in Gaza. But then you're saying, I don't want to cut off defensive Iron Dome capacities. So you don't want to cut off the defensive capacities of a government accusing genocide? Like, how does that make sense? And whatever you think the Iron Dome is for, if you're giving them anything, then you're helping them continue the genocide that you're accusing them of doing. So, like, how can you vote for giving them anything, or vote against a measure that would cut off capacities to them? It just doesn't make sense. And someone who pointed this out was Ilhan Omar, AOC's colleague in the squad. And this is what Ilhan Omar said. The genocide of the people of Gaza continues as members of Congress vote to fund Israel's defensive and offensive military capabilities. This is immoral, and no amount of excuses will ever make it okay.
Well said, Ilhan.
I don't know if she means that deliberately at AOC. I suspect she does, but even if she doesn't, that applies to AOC, because AOC is making excuses for so-called defensive aid to Israel.
And, you know, Caitlin Johnston made a really great analogy where she kind of mocked AOC's position by saying, yeah, I don't support a mass shooter. I just want to give him a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
And AOC doubled down, though, in response to criticism. And this is some of what she said. Google is free. If you're saying I voted for military funding, you are lying. Receipts attached. Drag me from my positions all you want, but lying about them doesn't make you part of the left, in quotes. If you believe neo-Nazis are welcome and operating in good faith, you can have them. So she's referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene as a neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, the specific critique is not that she voted for military funding, because when the Iron Dome has come up she's voted present, and now she's voted no on a measure that would cut the military funding. So yes, technically you didn't vote for it, but you voted against cutting it. So like it's really kind of a distinction without much difference. And then here's the thing: people like Ilhan Omar and others, they voted along with Marjorie Taylor Greene. So
yes,
AOC saying that like they're in cahoots with neo-Nazis now.
And here's the other thing. So this what AOC did is really annoying because she does this combination of condescending, but also revealing herself to be either stupid, naive, or disingenuous. So another thing she said in this vein was on Instagram. She says, remember, just because you see a meme doesn't mean it's true. And if you really believe that Marjorie Taylor Greene is an ally to Palestinians and a welcome part of your coalition, and that voting against her amendment that was designed exactly for this chaos is constructive and to be supported, then you can have her. Thanks. So first of all, she sounds like a triggered mean girl. She's also throwing people like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Summer Lee, and Al Green under the bus because they, of course, did vote for that amendment. And it's so disgusting. Like, she's trying to gaslight people. She obviously is upset that people are criticizing her. I do think that sometimes she's unfairly maligned, but in this context, it's totally deserved criticism. It's legitimate criticism. I get that people can be mean, but that doesn't mean that you get to like basically shit on your colleagues who are making a braver decision than you. Just ignore the criticism or have a nice way of dealing with it. Don't talk down to people in a way that reveals that you're either don't understand politics, because politics requires voting with people you don't agree with. Yeah. That's what happens. Bernie Sanders does that all the time, like he did with Yemen with Mike Lee.
And the part where she says that, like, or she suggests that this was like designed to cause chaos. So this was designed to like make you attack your colleagues and get all defensive. Like Marjorie Taylor, this is like a plot by Marjorie Taylor Greene to like divide the left because AOC won't vote for her resolution. It's silly.
It's so silly. And and Rashida is naive. Rashida et al. are naive, useful idiots.
Here's what I think the honest answer would be. Look, I'm guessing here. I think the reason why she's voting always for Iron Dome, or at least not voting against it, is because she wants to say when she runs for president or senate that I support Israel's defensive capabilities. Like when she gets attacked from the right for not being sufficiently pro-Israel, she'll say, I've always supported Israel's right to self-defense, as exemplified by my support of the Iron Dome. I think that's the reason. And listen, in politics, it's a dirty game. I don't even judge politicians by the same sort of moral tests I would apply to everybody else, because you do have to constantly compromise. And sometimes you compromise for a higher cause. Like you compromise on one thing and that allows you to do genuine good. And I imagine that the best case, like the best faith reading of AOC is that she wants to make certain compromises so she can push forward the progressive agenda she actually has. And I know some people wouldn't even accept that, but that's the best faith reading I can give it. And I like to give the best faith reading that I can of these things. So I understand compromise are made, but then, come out and say that. Say, listen, I realize, this vote isn't perfect, but I feel for the overall agenda I have to serve a progressive cause, I have to make certain compromises sometimes. And this is one of them.
I don't actually think she can say that because that's too self-incriminating. I think that that's the truth. I mean, I agree with you that could be why she's doing this. She just has to come up with a cover, basically. You know what I mean? Like, she has to have
I know that. What I'm saying is, rather than coming up with a cover where you attack your allies, I think it's much more honest and say, listen, I have to make certain compromises sometimes. And this is one of them. That's
but then her critics will say, she just did that. She didn't really want to vote against she didn't even want to vote for the defensive funding. She just did that as a political compromise. So then it kind of negates the political efficacy of it. But what I do agree with you on is that she has to respond to it in a way that doesn't involve shitting on her critics and shitting on her allies, Rashida and Ilhan Omar and Summer Lee, and in this case, Al Green. So I don't know, maybe we can spitball this. AOC, if you want to come on the show, we'll help you do some workshopping of ways to respond to your critics without sounding like a triggered mean girl. All right. So for Isn't That Terrible? Let's take a look at a very disturbing video, a very disturbing expose that comes from out of New York City. And it is it's something that I think a lot of people have been really disturbed by. And this is the way that ICE has been treating people people who are undocumented. And sometimes, though, they've made mistakes and they've locked the wrong people up. But this comes from a detention facility on the 10th floor of 26 Federal Plaza in New York City. And members of Congress have tried to get access to see the conditions, but they've been denied, which, by the way, violates regulations, which allows them to visit ICE detention facilities whenever they want. So this footage comes from a man who was detained and who snuck a phone in. So let's take a look at this footage. So you can see they are lying down on mylar blankets. There are not beds. They're packed in there. So he's saying that they're treating us like dogs. And you see these people, again, packed in on these mylar blankets. And they're sleeping in basically right next to a toilet. So that is pretty terrible. And it's just the latest example of the kind of extreme cruelty. And now I want to be clear that, it's not like the Democrats have been great on the issue of immigration. As people have pointed out many times, Obama himself deported more people than Trump had. But there is a real cruelty here that we're seeing. And there's been rotten food, overcrowding of cells. And images like this are starting to filter out of different detention centers. So it's terrible. Luckily, given that they've been denying that there are people being detained there, luckily someone snuck in a cell phone. So terrible images, though.
Well, those have been your 4 basic food groups.
So today we have 2 interviews. First, I'm speaking with 2 doctors. Dr. Ahmed Twaij, who is a doctor who has worked in Iraq. He's also a filmmaker and a journalist. And we are speaking to Dr. Mohamed Nour, who is based in England, but has just returned from Jordan, where he was trying to get to Gaza, but was turned away by Israel. He was fortunate enough to be able to go on a medical mission to Gaza with a charity in January 2025. And he'll be sharing those experiences with us, as well as his attempt to get back to Gaza now. So excited to be bringing onto the show 2 doctors. Ahmed Twaij is an award-winning filmmaker and journalist and doctor based in London. He has spent significant time in the Middle East and has volunteered as a medic in conflict zones with humanitarian organizations, including in Iraq. And Mohamed Nour works as an intensive care consultant in South London. He went on a medical mission to Gaza in January 2025. And he was based in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. He recently tried once again to get to Gaza, but was turned away by the Israeli government. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So Mohamed, we'll start with you. Tell us what you observed in Palestine, in Gaza when you were there, and what you've been hearing from your colleagues and contacts on the ground about what is happening right now as we speak.
Sure. It's really interesting, actually, because I went in January 2025, which was probably relatively the best time through the course of the war, in terms of it was about 2 weeks before the ceasefire that I went, and I was there for 2 weeks after. And in terms of, the food situation, it was much, much better than it is now. People were able to buy food. I remember when I got there, there was chicken shawarma there being sold, and everyone was really, really happy. So, and even in terms of the medical things that we were seeing, I mean, the craziest thing was when I was there, that the busiest day that I had was the ceasefire day. I remember everybody was really happy, actually. They really made a big deal about it. I remember everyone kind of got together outside Nasser Hospital in the A&E department outside. There was singing, dancing. We took so many pictures. People would say things like, today is the 8th of October, because the last however many months have just been a bad dream. That's how awful it was. They just wanted to forget about it. And then within about 2 hours, we had the most casualties that I saw the whole time I was there. I was there for a month. And we had, 100 come in. I won't forget the day, because I remember the first, 10 that came in were dead immediately. And it just very quickly became a scene out of a horror movie. There wasn't enough beds. We were treating people on the floor. It was just really horrible. Since I've left, that scene or that picture has only increased. So that probably happens now about 2 to 4 times per day, where you'll have that number of people come in a mass casualty kind of event. The food, people are really, really struggling. Like colleagues that I speak to now on kind of, WhatsApp, whatever, I can like physically see that they're much, much thinner. They're telling me, people who don't ever complain, they're saying to me, look, we're hungry. I remember one of my colleagues sent me a picture of, a really small bowl of chips and a small bowl of salad. And he said to me, this is what 4 or 5 of us are going to eat tonight. That's all we have. It's really tough. You almost don't know what to say sometimes. It's really difficult, to the point where even sometimes you message and, things that, even just the concepts there are very different. You'd ask them, how are you doing? And they'll say things like genuinely, I'm still alive. The concept of tomorrow is not even a thing for them. It's like, let's see if we get through today and then we can talk about tomorrow, what our plans are going to be. There was lots of stuff like that. There was a nurse in ICU who used to bring 2 of her kids with her to work. I'm thinking, what's going on here, right? And actually it was because her husband and 2 other children were at home. And the thinking was, well, if a bomb drops, at least 2 of my kids will still be alive with me. By November 2023, families would come and live in the same apartment building to the point where they would sleep in the same room, and I'd be like, why would you guys do that? And they said, because at least if a bomb drops, we'll all die together. There won't be some family members alive, some not, It's just a completely different way of thinking that they kind of have to survive out there. So yeah, it was, and it's just getting worse. It's just getting worse. And I read a piece or statement today from the director of the World Health Organization, who basically said, what do you call it other than mass starvation? And the saddest thing is the food is right outside, right? The food is there. It just needs to come in, and it's wholly preventable. I don't even know what to say about that in particular, to be honest.
And can you just explain why were there so many casualties that day, the day of the ceasefire? Was that a coincidence? Or was it because people felt like they could finally get to a hospital?
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, that particular day of the ceasefire, people felt that, okay, it's okay, we can try and go back to our homes. And so they'd started kind of moving towards Rafah. People, especially the people who went to Rafah, they'd gone there and essentially they were being shot and bombs were being dropped on them.
This has been kind of signature of how Israel has been acting throughout the war. And, at the start they said, we're going to create these humanitarian, crossings and, all these humanitarian lanes and for people to, leave the war zones. And what would happen is that they would target those actual humanitarian pathways that they'd allegedly created. And it just, it's kind of become signature of how they act, try to make people feel safe. And then as soon as they've collected in that area, attack it. And we've seen that with the aid deliveries as well, where people are going to these aid delivery stations, trying to collect food and water. And that's what's being attacked. And it's part of this. It's almost, I don't know if you remember the concept of the Dahiya doctrine, which they were implementing out in Lebanon, where the idea was, degrade a society so much that they kind of turn on themselves. And they've tried to do that through decades in Gaza. But unfortunately, or fortunately for the Gazans, they've been strong enough to stay together that this time they've decided that Dahiya doctrine is too, I guess, basic. They need to go extra and exterminate.
Right. The Dahiya doctrine, which, as you said, comes from, I believe it's Dahiya is a neighborhood in Beirut. Yeah. And it is inherently a war crime, because it includes disproportionate response. It violates the rule of proportionality and the rule of distinction.
It was described by the then IDF Chief of Staff, Gadi Eisenkot, who the idea was, because Dahiya is the what was known as the Hezbollah stronghold in south of Beirut, and they wanted to make the situation so unlivable for those people that they would turn on Hezbollah. They've tried to implement the same thing in Iran as well. That's why even Netanyahu, after the bombings that they started in Iran, he told the people to turn on the Iranian government and start a revolution. That was his hope of those attacks. So it's kind of their signature. They've done the same thing now in Gaza, and as Mohammed has described, make them feel good, collect them here, destroy the infrastructure. I think 94%, according to the WHO, of all hospitals have either been damaged or destroyed. 94%. Like that's not one or two. You can say one hospital may have housed Hamas militants. You can't say 94%. And then even then, there are reasons why we have humanitarian law, and the Geneva Convention state that medical facilities should be sacrosanct. The idea is that they are protected places. Even if a Hamas militant is being treated in one of the hospitals, it still shouldn't be attacked. And that is what the UN says, it's what the Geneva Conventions say. But Israel has continually bombed these places, saying that back in 2008, they claimed that they were firing rockets from the hospitals. No evidence was shown. And they flipped the script now because they couldn't show evidence of rockets being fired from hospitals. They're saying that there are tunnels under the hospitals which are housing either weapons or, Hamas headquarters, et cetera, but we're still waiting for the evidence. And who is it that's suffering is the local population. And we're not allowed to almost question about what it is that Israel does. When they do attack a place, that's a civilian infrastructure, who goes to investigate it? It's never allowed to be part of a global investigation. It becomes investigated by Israelis only. Their own military investigates themselves, which is a ludicrous thing. If you have a thief, in London, you're not going to expect him to investigate himself whether he's a thief or not. Yet somehow in Israel, they're allowed to investigate themselves.
They have these zones actually. There's like a red zone, and the whole of Gaza is kind of mapped out, and that red zone's been increasing over the last few months to the point where even Nasser Hospital, for example, is in that red zone, or certainly very close to it. And I asked some of my colleagues who are there, are you still going to be going to work? Some of the doctors, and they will say things like, look, dying isn't a big deal for us. We don't mind going to work and dying. But what they do say to me is, we really don't want to get arrested. The risk of us going and then being arrested, we don't really want to go. And they found that many healthcare workers, especially, it's almost reminiscent of when Nasser Hospital was emptied and closed the first time. This was like February, March of 24. Many of them were arrested. And actually they said, we would say things like, I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor, expecting that, they would, have some kind of mercy. But actually they said, no, it was like, we regretted saying anything about that. It was almost like, because we said that, we were targeted even more. It's pretty horrific actually that when it was emptied in February, March 24, they would say that, drones would come down, almost like quadcopters, and they'd be kind of, through their speakers, everybody needs to leave the hospital, and eventually they would leave, right? Because it got to a point where they weren't even able to kind of, Nasser Hospital is like a complex, there's many buildings inside. They wouldn't even be able to go from one building to the other. When you go there, it's really interesting because you see the buildings around the hospital still standing. And they used to say to me, it was full of snipers. When you go and you see the hospital, you'll see bullet holes everywhere, all over. And they would show me pictures on their phones, videos on their phones of people who were, 10 meters from the emergency department entrance who'd been shot. And somebody goes and helps them, they'd get shot. And they would leave them. And they showed me videos of like dogs and cats eating from their dead bodies because nobody would dare go and grab them. And then eventually they would have to leave, and they'd have to go through these checkpoints, and they'd go kind of 5 at a time. And I remember they all relatively said the same thing in terms of, what happened to them, whether it was a nurse or a doctor. They would get picked out of the line. They would be made to go, to wait in another holding area. They would say to me, one of them, I remember he said to me, I got taken behind a building, and he goes, I remember seeing 200 men all completely naked with their hands kind of with plastic cuffs on and blindfolded. He said they took all of my belongings, made me like naked, no boxes, nothing. And the same thing. He goes, I remember sitting there for a couple of hours. Then they took us into a building and we were just beaten with, punch kicked sticks for another couple of hours. And then they get transported to a prison in Israel, not in Gaza. I remember he said we got packed into the truck. And his words were, it was like we were chickens. It wasn't like we were picked up and sat down. We were just shoved in the back of a truck. And then when they get to the prison, they get given, their prison clothes. The plastic cuffs get changed to metal cuffs, and the blindfold stays on. And they'd be given kind of a small area, 1 meter by 2 meters, and they get put in a certain position, and they stay in that position, like on their knees, essentially, for 20 hours a day. I remember he said we were allowed to lie down for 4 hours a day. And they also said different things about food. I remember one said to me, we used to get one piece of cucumber, one piece of bread every day. Another said we would get it 3 times a day. You know, I remember asking them about the toilet. They said, you know, we were in like a, I don't know, like I think there's a image from Amnesty International of what these kind of prisons look like, but they're not buildings with barbed wire going round. Maybe, I don't know, half the size of a football field. And there's like a tin roof, and they're all there just sitting there. There's one toilet between, I don't know, 100 of them or something. And they get, you know, I said, how did you go to the toilet? They picked us up, took us to the toilet, and he goes, with our cuffs. And I remember him showing me, you know, with the cuffs, we would pull down our pants, go to the toilet, and there was no kind of tissue, no water, nothing. And we had to put our pants back up ourselves and then go back and sit down. And he goes, unsurprisingly, infection was rife, skin infections, joint problems, joint infections. You know, one of them said to me, I remember he said, one said to me, I never got to have a shower. One said, I remember we got to have a shower once a week, and it was always cold water. And he said, I'll never forget that, because he said, I remember one day a prisoner kind of cried out and said, why is it always cold? Why is it always cold water? And he said, and then we heard him scream because they'd thrown boiling water over him, you know? And no one's checking, right? Who's going there to check what's going on in the Israeli prisons? I mean, the people don't even know if their loved ones are even in prison. That was one of the crazy things. I remember one of them said to me as I was leaving, he goes, it broke me, because there was a certain day that everybody knew that this was the day that people would leave the prison. And he said, people would start shouting out. You know, they'd say, this is my wife's number, my father's number, my mother's number. Please call them. Please call them. And he goes, I remember, there was no way I was going to remember everyone's number. I just wasn't going to remember. But I would say to them all, yes, okay, I'll call them. And he goes, it would break me. You know, and even now, there's not like a log or a list that they can go and approach the Israeli military or whoever and say, you know, is my relative in prison or not? You know, it's just, you know, after going through the worst kind of trauma in your life, you know, even as a doctor, you know, I remember one doctor saying to me, you know, I remember seeing 1,000 people die within a few days. Yeah. You know, I can't imagine what effect that has on you, right? And then to go from that to then kind of prison and the most awful torture, really, really horrific, right? What does that do to a person? You know, and it's just something I guess we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, and Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is still in custody, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, no, he's still kidnapped. He's still being tortured. We know that they've been targeting doctors. One of them, Adnan al-Bursh, was killed basically tortured to death, including sexually assaulted, sexually abused. So given what you knew going before you went there, Mohamed, and given what you learned once you were there, what made you want to go back? Like what kind of thinking did you have to go through to decide whether or not you were going to basically, risk your life by going back?
I think, you see what's happening there. And then, you know, when you speak to people there, you kind of build this kind of connection. And I think a part of me just felt like I need to go now, because in 6 months, there might be nothing left like to go to, you know. And even now, I think sometimes, you know, if I go, like now I was supposed to go for a couple of weeks. And I think, you know, really what would I have done, you know, in a couple of weeks? You know, I mean, the guys there, they talk to me about, you know, life-saving procedures that they're doing every day. But, you know, it's probably just a drop in the water or the ocean, you know, of the amount of work you have to do. But really it was for them. It was because, you know, when you go there, I can't tell you how it uplifts them. Like they feel like, okay, yeah, we haven't been forgotten. It's just nice to see a familiar face for them, you know, and they always say, please tell our story, tell everyone about what's happened here, please. You know, you're our kind of mouthpiece, tell everybody. So yeah, that was my intention. We kind of, there's doctors who go kind of every few weeks from all the various charities, and the way it works is the Israelis get given the name in advance anyway, but there's a final list that comes out the day before the convoy goes into Gaza. And it can be the convoy always leaves about 6 a.m. And, you know, you find out potentially up to kind of midnight the night before. So literally 6 hours before sometimes, whether you've been approved or not. You get this list, and the list, either your name comes back green, which means you're good to go, or it comes back kind of not highlighted, which means I think you're still being investigated or something, or it comes back red, which means you're not going to be allowed to go. And my name came back red. Literally, I just went a few days ago, and it came back red, having been green kind of in January. And there's no explanation. There's no kind of appeal process. There's nothing. It's just, you just get told your name's red. You need to go back home. That's it. There's no kind of questioning.
How many of you were turned away?
So there was 12 of us, and 4 got turned away.
What did you tell your loved ones before you left? But I mean, do you have to have a talk with people? Like, do you talk to them in case something happens?
Yeah. There's parents. I've got a really good kind of family support system around me, I guess. Parents. I've got 4 kids as well. The youngest is 2. But my wife's amazing. My wife's amazing, and she's. I think for us, we see it like a big, even kind of religiously, it's like a way for us to kind of give back to the people and make God happy. And for us, I think our thinking is, it doesn't matter how bad we might find it or how much we have to sacrifice. It'll never be as big as the sacrifice that the people there are making. It'll never compare.
Including if you yourself die.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something for us. We're really big believers in fate, and whatever destiny, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and it's written. So all I can do is try my best, and whatever happens, happens.
Well, wow, that's for some reason I didn't expect you to have kids. Not that, I mean, I know people who have kids, but I was just like, you were talking about it with such fearlessness that I was like, oh, this guy is clearly single. I didn't want to pry, but I was like, okay, so what does he say with his parents or siblings or best friends or like partner maybe? But like, okay. So, but no, the whole thing. Okay. And Ahmed, what about you? I mean, you haven't gone to Gaza, but you did go to Iraq. It was during the ISIS. What would you say? Crisis, rise, uptick. What made you want to go there and risk? And did you feel like you were risking your life when you went there?
Yeah, it does. Honestly, if I'm honest with you, especially with everything we know about ISIS, brutal genocidal organization, whatever you want to call it, terrorist group. So that there is an element, and when you come face to face with them, it is a scary feeling. So you do feel at risk, when you're having to go in these convoys with the military and things. The difference is with myself and those who go to Gaza, for example, is that I was behind a government protection, whereas in Gaza, they are being attacked by basically a superpower backed by the US with the most sophisticated weaponry, whereas in Mosul we potentially had the protection of both the American military, the British military, and the Iraqi military. So kind of I can't even compare that situation with the other. Although of course there is always a risk whenever you go into a conflict zone. The difference is now, when they planned the Mosul offensive to liberate Mosul from ISIS, they did create humanitarian corridors, but they were protected. They were labeled by the Americans, the Brits, and the Iraqis. This is going to be a humanitarian corridor. Anyone who's not part of ISIS is free to leave. And they went into what were called internally displaced camps, so IDP camps, and they had access to healthcare, etc., until their papers had been cleared to prove that they weren't part of ISIS. Whereas the humanitarian corridors in Gaza were the ones that were attacked. Hospitals were protected in Gaza. The biggest hospital in Mosul, which catered for nearly 2 million people, and you can compare almost the population side of Mosul to Gaza, which is why it's such a comparison that you can make. But that hospital was again protected. Like ISIS did use part of it as their base, but the attacks that came from the Americans and the Iraqi military only was that part of the base. The rest of the hospital remained functional throughout the time. Whereas, like we've seen, 94% of all hospitals have been damaged. 1,400 healthcare workers have been killed, and that was as of May, according to Medical Aid Palestine. So when you ask me, did I feel scared? Yeah, but nothing in comparison to to those in that have had to go to Gaza, because you don't know who's going to be attacked. Like, there's videos of doctors walking to the hospital and the airstrike hits their head. And even now, like as Mohammed was saying about, all these life-saving procedures, but it's almost, you think about it, to what are they going to, these people who have just been saved from an airstrike, what are they going to come out into? A complete humanitarian crisis where OCHA, the UN humanitarian group, is saying that the starvation index is at the highest level it can be for 500,000 of the people that live in Gaza. So they're going to, they've had this life-saving operation, but they're going to die. And Dr. Abu Salmiya, who's the chief doctor at Al Shifa Hospital, he said that even the doctors now are too exhausted to look after their patients, because that's how much the level of starvation has reached. And just in one day, I think yesterday or the day before, 16 people died of starvation. And, for non-medics out there, you don't die of starvation after 1 or 2 days of starvation. To die of starvation, that's weeks of starvation. That's weeks of organized lack of access towards. And how many of these videos do we have to see of kids starving, and photos of bones, skin and bones, for us to be like, you know what, it's time to call it an end? And it really frustrates me and surprises me. Like, obviously, during the Vietnam War, it took one photo for the whole world to go against the U.S. Military action in Vietnam and stop the war. It was one photo of the napalm girl. We saw her. She's naked. She's skin and bones, and there's fire in the background. Just took one picture, and we have seen thousands of napalm girls in Gaza, yet Israel still gets back. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel more congressional approval for more attacks. It was the only time I've heard Lindsey Graham say anything against the attacks by Israel is when a church was bombed by Israel. And that's the only time he's piped up. And then if you're going to sit there comparing ISIS to Hamas, ISIS was bombing churches. In Gaza, churches existed. So the real question is, who is the closer to ISIS?
You mean Israel, the Israeli government, or Hamas?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, obviously it's the Israeli government. It's also based on such ignorance and like Islamophobia, that people, they kind of depend on people not knowing anything about ISIS, not knowing anything about Hamas. So it's like, oh, Islam, they're the same. Even though it's like comparing, I don't know, like AIPAC and Jewish Voice for Peace or something.
Yeah, of course. You can even say that it's the ignorance of what is a Palestinian, because a lot of them just assume, Palestinian equals Muslim.
Right. That's
but actually, a lot of Palestinians are Christians. And so, when Christian Zionists are funding an Israeli state, it's Christian Palestinians who are suffering.
But they don't care, because they're not actually, they don't,
But it's just one thing, when you talk about, the war itself, but now this kind of stage of starvation, right? And baby feed, not able to get in. Imagine we're packing our bags, right, to go in today, that the guys who went in today, right? We have to make sure we don't take in too much baby feed, just in case when we cross the border, they take away our whole suitcase, or because you've taken too much. It's just bonkers, There's babies there who are going into hospital every day. They're getting like a cannula, a drip put into them. They're getting a bit of sugary water, and then they're said, okay, come back tomorrow now. That's all you can have today. It's just bonkers,
Are there any organizations that are able to get food in? People keep asking this question on a lot of WhatsApp groups I'm on, but anything?
Not on a large scale. I think it's all being controlled now by...
At the moment, no. I think I just read there's 900 trucks waiting to enter Gaza on the Israeli border. 900. And it's insane. And Mohammed will know better than me, like when it comes to like patients on intensive care, for example, all the guidelines in every hospital say early nutrition is better for outcomes. All the guys. So on day one of a patient entering intensive care, the idea is you start feeding them. And that's for, someone who's could be relatively fit and well beforehand. But these are people who have been through 2 years of a war, and have no access to nutrition. They're at risk of infection, risk of, lack of malnutrition, risk of death, risk of liver disease.
Even just healing. Professor Nick Maynard, who's a surgeon who's just come back actually, he mentioned this, that he's operating on all these people, and they haven't even got the right conditions for afterwards in intensive care. How do you expect their bodies to heal if they've got no nutrition going in?
Well, you guys have been so generous with your time. Any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
I mean, I think we should just call it what it is and just call it a genocide. It's not my words. Omer Bartov has called it a genocide, who is a professor of Holocaust and genocide studies at Brown University. And he was reluctant for the last 2 years to call it a genocide. And last week he's come out and said, you know what? It all points towards it being a genocide. And to be honest, it's not even my own words. Israeli ministers have been calling it a Holocaust for decades. They've been calling for a Holocaust in Gaza for decades. They've used the word Holocaust for decades. So I think we should just call it what it is. And this idea of creating this humanitarian city in Rafah is just a scary, scary documentation plan where, if it's not ethnic cleansing, I don't know what else you can call that kind of situation. And it's happened before. We've witnessed it in the past in the Namibian genocide in the early 20th century, where they shifted people into an area and it ended up committing genocide. It happened with the Armenian genocide. In fact, even happened during the Holocaust, where they put people into. The idea initially wasn't to kill everyone. It turned into that afterwards. And it's happening again now.
I just want to say on a kind of maybe a more micro level, right? I don't think it's okay for people not to talk about this. And when I say people, I mean the general Joe public, right? Like people who are going to work, watching Netflix, going out to theatre, whatever. I feel like in years to come, being silent on this issue is going to be something people will really, really regret. The fact that we should at least have spoken about this. We should be talking about it everywhere, at work, at schools, wherever, to say this is not acceptable. And so at the very least, we can all say, look, we spoke up against this. We did as much as we could do for this issue, and we tried our best. And I think everybody should be able to say that.
Do you know what I think has happened though? Like, I think people have become numb because it's been 2 years. And I even remember it was kind of like, for me, especially at the start, you're flicking through all these like Instagram reels and TikToks or whatever, where you're seeing this destruction and you're like, oh, this thing has broken my heart. Nothing can ever shatter my heart more. And then the next video is something that's even worse. Yeah. And it's been like that for now 2 years.
Yeah.
You can almost understand that people have become numb to it, because it's like we're witnessing a genocide, yet you expect me to be paying attention to the women's Euro football final or whatever. Yeah. Like it's a weird world dystopia that we live in.
Well, you are speaking out about it, so you guys are covered, and Mohamed, you're risking your life there. Not to make you feel bad, Ahmed, you're also very, very outspoken, and you do a lot of journalism on this, and you've been to Iraq, so you've risked your life way more than I have. But I just want to thank you guys so much for everything you do, and it's hard to keep hope or faith or optimism, but we have to do whatever we can. So, a lot of people are like, think about what people say, like, what would you have done during the Holocaust? So this is it for our time. Well, thank you both so much.
Thanks, Casey. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Now we turn to our next guest, Mosab Abu Toha. He is a Palestinian poet, author, scholar, and librarian, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Commentary for his essays on the Gaza war. Mosab is from Gaza. Every day on social media, he is sharing accounts of the carnage being inflicted there on the people of Gaza by Israel. And we spoke to him in the midst of the latest phase of Israel's genocide, which is a full-blown Israeli starvation siege. Mosab Abu Toha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron and Kathy.
Talk to us about what you're hearing from your loved ones in Gaza.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is more suffering, more complaints about the lack of food, the lack of medicine, the lack of formula for the kids, the lack of diapers. Even no one's talking about the fact that people in Gaza for a long time started using plastic bags, to put on their children in Leo diapers.
Instead of diapers.
Yeah. This is even when I was in Gaza in October and November. They started doing that in November. I mean, Israel shut everything down. People focus on the lack of electricity, of fuel, of medicine, but no one talks about the lack of diapers, the lack of clothes. Many children grew up and they don't have new clothes to put on. It's very difficult to find clothes in Gaza. Mainly people are struggling to find water, to find food, to find medicine, to find diapers. Even the elderly, by the way, because we care about children, we care about every single one. And we care also about our parents and siblings, but also we care about the elderly people. My father's uncle's wife is 85 years old. She's the husband of my father's brother. She's 85 years old.
The wife of your grandfather's brother, yeah.
Yeah, and they cannot find diapers for their mother who is about to die. I mean, she could die any moment. I mean, she's sick. She's an elderly woman, but they need diapers for their mother, an 85-year-old mother who is about to die any moment. She's very sick, and my father's cousin, the son of that mother, he talks to me in the phone. He tells me if there is diaper, it is very, very expensive. One piece of diaper, it costs them about $30. If it's there, I mean, you can't. It's very, very difficult to find these things. But I don't know how the people here in this country, how people in Europe, when they care about their parents and visiting them, bringing them everything. I mean, do you really not think about the elderly people in Gaza, how they're struggling, how they need medicine, how they even need clothes, clean clothes, or even clean water? How do you spend your day, taking care of your parents who are elderly, and you never think about the elderly people in Gaza. That's 22 months of ongoing genocide. That's not only about the killing of the people there, but I mean elderly people. I mean, my heart broke when my father's cousin told me about his mother. He was about to cry, really. He told me, I mean, I can't stand looking at my mother. We need to change her diapers and there's no diaper. So this is, it's not only about food. I mean, people complain about the food. People complain about, water. People complain about the fact that Israel keeps kicking them out of one place that they have just moved to after they were forced out of their houses and tents. So people are tired. People say, you know what? I hope the next missile hits me, and I want to die. I just want to don't continue to run from this place to another place, from stand in this line and get shot at. And so people are tired. It's not only about the killing. People are dying before are killed.
Can you talk about the change in terms of getting aid? So what it was like before the Israel and the U.S. basically destroyed the UN aid distribution system, how people would get aid then, to what it means now. And I put aid in quotes because what they're getting from the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation includes massacres, because Israel and mercenaries have been shooting at people.
These are death sites. Yeah, these are death sites. So first of all, we all agree on one thing, which is that this is not a humanitarian foundation, because if you want to do a humanitarian work, you deliver the food to the people who need it. You don't have them walk miles and miles when there's no transportation, when their bodies could barely help them walk 5 or 10 miles. So there is nothing humanitarian about it. And the second thing, the fact that it is located, or they are put in places where the Israeli army is heavily present. Also, these so-called humanitarian sites, none of them exist in North Gaza, and that's part of the Israeli plan of emptying North Gaza. Of course, after they destroyed much of the place. If you look at photos and videos from Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, it's rare that you can find any building still standing. What's happening is that two people get killed in two ways. People either go to these so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites in Rafah, in Khan Yunis, and also near the Netzarim corridor. So people go there in the very early hours of the morning before the sites open. So people spend hours and hours there waiting for the gates to open. Sometimes, I mean, based on what I hear from friends and family members, sometimes the people who are running these sites, they would turn on a light, which is a signal that, okay, now it's time to go. And they would go in, and then there would be another sign that, okay, it's shut now. So anyone who stays there for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, they would be shot at. They would be killed. So this is one of the stories that I hear. The other stories, of course, people who are waiting maybe in the early hours in the morning, waiting, for aid, and then the Israelis start shooting at them using tank fire, using machine guns, and sometimes some machine guns are put on cranes. So these are machine guns that there are no Israeli soldiers inside, there are no tanks, but this is based on more than one eyewitness. They told me that there were some cranes, and on them are mounted some machine guns that are controlled from afar. So this is the first way is people go to these sites and they know that they could be shot at. Many of them were killed. And the other way that people try to get food is waiting on the streets, where the food trucks that are going sometimes to the WFP, World Food Program, and other organizations, especially in the past few days. So people would be waiting in the street, knowing that this is the passage which the trucks would take. So they would wait there, and sometimes Israel would bomb these groups of people who are waiting there. Right? The latest escalation was when people started going to Beit Lahia, north of Gaza. They went to Beit Lahia, and that was on Sunday when I lost a second cousin of mine. In large numbers, they went to Beit Lahia, about a mile maybe from the Zikim aid crossing, which is between Beit Lahia and Israel. So they were waiting in large numbers there. They knew that the aid trucks were leaving through that crossing. So they waited I think it was a mile away. And then Israel, once the trucks left the Israeli side of the crossing, the Israelis fired tank shells on people. And my wife's brother was wounded in that tank shelling, and a cousin, and they are still hospitalized in a field hospital in Deir al-Balah. There is a dangerous thing but we need to do more investigation about this. I heard at least two people who were in Beit Lahia at the time when Israel killed about maybe 70, 80 people on Sunday. One of them was my second cousin, Ali Abu Toha. I heard at least two people telling me that one of the drivers of the aid trucks was told by the Israeli soldiers that he must not stop until he reaches an area near a mosque on the beach, which is called Al-Khalidi Mosque, which is about maybe 2 miles away from the crossing, the aid crossing. And he was told if he stops before he reaches that area, the truck would be bombed. And that is why the aid trucks, ran people over. I talked to one of my neighbors, and he told me his leg was amputated. That was on Tuesday, 2 days ago. I talked to him video call in the American Field Hospital in Deir al-Balah, and I asked him how did he lose his leg. He told me the truck ran me over. And then later I heard about these testimonies that the aid truck drivers were ordered not to stop, even if he had to run people over. Sometimes they would go back, to evade, the population, the large number of people, and he would crush people on both ways. So he couldn't stop because he was given orders by the Israeli soldiers not to stop until he reaches that area. So this is based at least on 2 eyewitnesses that I talked to, and I think there needs to be investigation about this.
Your friend who had the amputation, did he have anesthesia?
I really don't know. I didn't ask him about that. But the shocking thing is that when I was talking to my brother-in-law and his cousin, who were injured in a tank shell, while they were passing the phone to each other, I saw someone on a hospital cot there in that same room. I mean, I didn't know who that was, really. And then when the phone was passed back to my brother-in-law, someone was sitting next to him, and it was the brother of the person on the hospital cot. And he told me, Muayyad is here, your friend. And I said, what? Muayyad? And then he passed the phone to Muayyad, the person with the amputated leg. I couldn't recognize him from the video.
Because he's so skinny?
And he told me that he was run over by the aid truck, and he lost his leg. And when he was taken to the field hospital in Deir al-Balah, which is a long distance from where the massacre took place, he had to lie on the floor of the hospital for hours before the doctors came to operate on him, because there were other people with severely critical wounds. And Muayyad is a father of children, by the way. And he and his brothers ran a barbecue restaurant in Beit Laia. And of course, everything is gone. The restaurant, the house, the neighborhood, the city itself is gone. So someone like Muayyad, someone who I used to play soccer with, will no longer be able to play soccer. Now he's unable to provide for his wife and 2 children, assuming that there's something to provide his family with.
I'm so sorry.
All these stories that I'm telling you, it's just from 4 days ago.
Right.
Over the past 4 days.
And how many family members have you lost as of this point?
So, I mean, I did not really count, because at one point, I started to count how many members of my family were still alive. And then a few days, my wife came to me and she took the notebook from me. She said, don't do that. I swear to God, a few days later, the Israeli soldiers and tanks besieged my aunt's house in Fallujah, which is in Jabalia camp. And 20 hours later, they bombed the house. 15 people were killed, including a first cousin, my great aunt Fatima Dibest, and 13 other members of that family. The bodies of my great aunt is still buried under the rubble. So I really don't want to count how many members of my family are still alive, how many were killed. It's a bad omen for me. I tried to do it one time in October 2024, and a few days later, my aunt's house was besieged. And by the way, my aunt, the aunt I'm talking about, survived, but she was wounded. She had 5 daughters. One of them was killed, Samad Dibis, 7 years old. The other daughters were wounded, and I talked to them, and they are really starved by this blockade and genocide. But I don't want to count, at least in one airstrike in October 2023, 30 members of my family, my father's cousin, his wife, their children and their grandchildren, 30 people in one airstrike.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's unfathomable. And knowing that our government is doing this, like we're paying taxes to support this. I want to ask you about a development that just happened Thursday. This is a tweet from Steve Witkoff. He says, "We have decided to bring our team home from Doha consultations after the latest response from Hamas, which clearly shows a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home and try to create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza. It is a shame that Hamas has acted in this selfish way. We are resolute in seeking an end to this conflict and a permanent peace in Gaza." So what are your thoughts on that comment?
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, first of all, the word selfish. I mean, I don't have to agree or disagree with what he's saying, but I'm just commenting as a Palestinian refugee. So the word selfish, I think he should apply it to the Israelis who are expanding their settlements in the West Bank. What is more selfish than stealing and killing people, stealing people's lands and killing more and more people? Okay, this is one thing. I'm not sure if he made a comment like that when Israel did not agree to a ceasefire resolution that Hamas agreed to, but they asked the same thing, okay? So for me, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Israel, for me, the most important thing is to stop the killing. I mean, why don't we agree and disagree while no more families in Gaza are being erased by Israel? right? Okay, you can agree, you can disagree, you can say they are selfish, they are selfless, they are good, I don't care what you think about them, but just stop the killing. Because from what I see, it seems like no matter what happens, whether Hamas agrees to a 60-day ceasefire, just like they agreed in January, whether they agreed or not, there is no guarantee that Israel is not going to resume the genocide. This is something that we watched, happening in March 2023 when Israel carried out a series of airstrikes that killed about 400-500 people in just an hour. So it is unbelievable that the American administration is willing to go that far to cover up for Israel and its crimes. I think the United States is not only complicit, they are taking part in the genocide in Gaza and also in the occupation of the West Bank and other areas. What is the one thing that the United States did, to stop Israel from not only killing people in Gaza, but also stopping the Israeli illegal settlements in the West Bank? What is one step that they did, to stop Israel? Okay, you did something wrong, stop here. Even though they said it is, at one point they said that these settlements are illegal. Over the past years, they said these settlements are illegal. Okay, so what is the one thing that you did, in response to this illegal act by Israel? None. So America is concerned about the safety and security of Israel, a country that is occupying other people and other people's land. So who is concerned about our security as a people who are living under occupation? I'm not sure who people should be worried about. The security, whose security people should be concerned about? The security of an occupying country, and a country that has every kind of weapons in the world, or the security of the people who are living under occupation for 77 years and now under genocide for 22 months. How is it possible that our security is not on the table of anyone, whether it's an Arab country or a Western country? How is our safety not on the table? And I tell you why. Because our humanity is not considered. So we do not have enough humanity for people to see that, these people have rights. These people deserve, to be protected, from a nuclear country, right? So this is the problem. The problem is not with Witkoff, with his statement, with what he thinks about Hamas, or with what he thinks about Israel. The thing is that we are not considered as human beings. We are not considered as human. Otherwise, Israel would not be allowed to carry on its land theft, the bombing of tents, the bombing of hospitals, of schools, because they are going to use the same excuse. Hamas uses hospitals. Hamas uses the human shield. Hamas uses... Okay, you know what? Here's the thing. Let's say Hamas is criminal. Why do you kill me? Why do you kill families? So if they are hiding behind civilians, so you know that, let's say they hide behind civilians, okay? So why do you kill civilians? Are you falling into the trap that Hamas is setting for you? So they create things up and they do evil things, and they use evil excuses, and they continue using the same thing. Hamas, for example, yesterday on Sky News, the spokesperson of the Israeli government said Hamas designed this to harm the Palestinian people. Wow. So what about 1948 when my grandparents were expelled from Jaffa? Did Hamas design the Nakba for the Palestinian people? Did Hamas design the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip in 1967? Right? But for me as Palestinian, our demands are clear. As a Palestinian refugee, we have to enjoy every single right that everyone on earth deserves to enjoy. Freedom from occupation, from suppression, from oppression. We have the right to be humanized just like anyone else in the world. Our names should be, when we are killed or imprisoned, everyone needs to humanize us on media, because we are dehumanized. We are treated as numbers. And one of the latest piece in the New York Times by Patrick Kingsley, the New York Times bureau chief, after Israel killed about 100 people near the Zikim aid crossing, the headline was not that Israel killed these people, or how catastrophic it is for these people and their families. No, it was something that highlighted for him and the New York Times Israel's failure, in its plan for post-war in Gaza. So it's something. It is. So we are not even statistics. We are just something that highlights something for journalists and maybe critics and analysts. Yeah, we are not. I mean, we are not important in ourselves. We just highlight, how the system works, where it fails, Yeah, something like that. So we are. It's unbelievable, this genocide. It's not only about the killing, but also we are killed twice. The way they portray us, the way they use the story of us being killed every day, to understand how Israel plan is working or not working. No, it's not working. So killed 100, it means, it's not gonna work. So let's try a different means.
And because Israel has impunity, Israeli ministers feel entitled to be honest about their plans, which is ethnic cleansing and moving back in the illegal Jewish settlers that used to steal land in Gaza. This is a headline from an Israeli news outlet. Israel's heritage minister, Amichai Eliyahu, says Israel racing ahead to wipe out Gaza will make it Jewish. And I mean, what are your thoughts on the prospect of your land not only being ethnically cleansed, but having these fanatical Jewish settlers come back and steal it?
Okay, so for me, again, as a Palestinian refugee, so I'm talking here as a Palestinian refugee always, because this is who I am. We, as Palestinians, we do not have any place else to go to. And we refuse to leave Palestine because this is the only place we know, okay? Our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, you can count as far as you want, they do not know any country other than Palestine, right? We did not come from other countries. We come from that land. So we will not leave Gaza. We will return to Gaza. People will stay in Gaza, even if they had to leave it, they will return, because this is the only place we know, and this is the only place we feel home. Home for us is Palestine. So no one can take that home from us. I mean, if I was, still alive, if I was born in 1948 and before, I mean, I would have no problem with anyone living in Palestine, be them Jews, Christians, atheists, Hindus, any place. I mean, anyone has the right to live anywhere, right? But you can't just, exist in my place, not to exist in my place. You kill me, and then you push me away, and then you deny that I existed.
Right.
So, I mean, every person has the right to live anywhere they want, as long as they live equally with other people, as long as they do not try to erase the other people who live there and who lived there for as long as we can remember. Palestine is the only place we know. We don't have our other passports that can allow us to go to other countries. We are Palestinians, and this is the only place we know, and this is the only place we want to know.
And there were Palestinian Jews living there before.
Yes, sure.
That wasn't an issue. The issue was when there was the decision to become as they call it, a demographic majority, and to turn it into a Jewish state, which is not coexistence, which is not living equally with people.
Yeah, I mean, the Jewish people went through, a Holocaust, and that Holocaust was in Europe. It was not in Palestine. It was not in Jaffa. It was not in Gaza.
Right.
So it's for me, it is unbelievable that the Jewish people were persecuted in Europe. They were killed by the millions, and now they were helped, to go to Palestine, and they were encouraged, and supported in doing so by the same countries. And until today, Germany, for example, they are encouraged, and they are supported, and they are protected by the same countries who killed them.
Right.
Who's going to protect us as Palestinians? Okay, where are we in this equation?
Yeah, it's such an important point. The Holocaust did not happen in Palestine. There's another Holocaust now, but the Holocaust of the Nazi Holocaust was not perpetuated by Palestinians. And people love to think that, Europe really felt guilty about what happened to the Jews. So after the war, that's why they supported the state of Israel. Of course, if they felt guilty about what had happened, they would have let the Jews in during the Holocaust and then after the Holocaust. But they didn't want that, so they sent them to Palestine. Like that's another aspect of it, right? Is that this was such a colonial project, and a great way to not have to bring in the people that you claim to care about.
It's just like when someone who's kind-hearted, feels sorry for someone who's really starved, and then they steal that loaf of bread from someone who only has that loaf of bread, and then give it to the other person. And I feel sorry because I already took your loaf of bread, and then I'm gonna steal another loaf of bread from someone and give it to you. That same one, that Palestinian, is left with no bread and they are starved to death. This is what's happening. If you want to be generous with anyone, be generous, using what you have, what you possess, not what other people. Right. I mean, that's the only land we know. Palestine is the only land we know. And we don't want to know any other country, be it Arab or Western country. We don't need to know any other countries.
Mosab, why don't we wrap with a reading from you, if you're comfortable doing that now. Something you wrote recently.
Yeah, there is a poem that I posted yesterday, but in fact, I wrote that poem in January 2024, but I post it again because there is a context here. So the poem I wrote is as follows. He left home to buy some bread for his kids. News of his death made it home, but not the bread. No bread. Death sits to eat whoever remains of the kids. No need for a table, no need for bread. So in January 2024, there were still some bakeries, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency was distributing bread to the people who need it, with dignity. But and some people, when they are back, to their homes, they would be killed in an airstrike. So neither the bread nor the father would make it home to their families. So nowadays, people are not dying because as they are carrying bread, they are killed as they try to get flour for their families. So it is very relevant. It is a very relevant poem because people in Gaza have always been struggling to provide for their families, especially bread. I mean, I talk to people in Gaza, family and friends, and always they tell me, I have no problem, It's not that I have no problem, but it seems like it is less tragic to die in a tent, in an airstrike, than to die while you are hungry. So people say, I talked to my mother-in-law, for example. She said, the problem now is not the airstrike, it's not the drones, it's not the bombs. It's just that we don't have food. This is what people are telling me these days. People want to eat, even if they are going to be killed. They can't stop the killing, but they can't just, stay in their tents while their children are crying and out of hunger. How can you just imagine, Katie and Aaron, you're sitting in a tent and there are F-16, there are F-35, and there are drones in the sky. They could drop a bomb and kill you. But just imagine you're sitting there for 12 hours and there is no food there. There is no water. What do you do? How are you going to talk to your kids? At one point, I was listening in the background when Samah, 6 years old, was in a tent with my mother-in-law in Gaza City. That was just 2 weeks ago. And she was crying. She said, I want to eat. I'm hungry. And then my mother-in-law told her, Samah, just, be patient. When it's sunset, we will have some food. Just try to drink some water. So they were forcing, unfortunately, they were forcing little babies to fast for 12 hours or maybe for 15 hours because the fathers and the brothers are outside looking for food, knowing that they could not come back with anything or they could not come back at all.
Is this changing the minds of anyone? Do you know, in Israel? It doesn't seem like it, but it does this like slow motion starvation. Is anyone saying, okay, this is too much? Okay, I supported this before, but now this is just too much, this slow, deliberate starvation.
I think that the Israeli people many of them have been convinced that the people in Gaza are animals, or even not animals. Animals are being treated better than human beings, especially here in the United States and in Israel. So I think unfortunately people in Israel have been convinced that these people even are less than animals. The same way the Nazis were treating the Jewish people in Europe. Yeah. I can't imagine that this is happening. It's not even fiction. It's beyond fiction.
The irony of a country that claimed to be founded to never in the name of never again, which is doing so many of the things that the Nazis did.
This is harming. This is very harmful for the Jewish people, by the way, because if a country, if a group of people who survived the Holocaust are doing something that is not less horrible than what happened, especially not because of what Israel is doing per se, but because of the fact that this is live stream, people are seeing what's happening. Right. It's not something that we are told about a month later or 2 weeks later. That did you hear about the boy who died of starvation in the tent with his mother? Yeah, I heard that story from a journalist there. No, you watch the video. You watch the video. You watch the video as a skeleton lies on a hospital cot. And sometimes you watch videos of babies, who are about to die, and no one is doing anything. And by the way, starvation, to be clear, is not only about lack of food. It's also about lack of food supplement and formula for the kids, because a baby who is 1 year old or 5 months old, they don't need flour, right? They need life-saving supplements, like formula, like medicine. So that's why some of the people who died, not only because there was no flour, there was no fresh vegetable or fruit, by the way. People in Gaza not only need flour and rice and lentils. People need to eat fresh fruit. People have been deprived for months. I know some friends who have never eaten any fruit or vegetable for 20 months at least. Some people have never eaten meat at all. So you can't just, give people some flour, some rice, and say, "Oh, we are not starving them." For me, not allowing in meat, vegetable, and fruit, this is a kind of starvation. I want to eat healthy food, not only bread, because bread is not totally healthy, and sugar is not totally healthy. Right? And rice, it doesn't make me a healthy person. I need to eat fruit and vegetables.
I'm so sorry about this. And is there anything else you want to make sure that our audience knows, people watching, listening know?
I hope that people everywhere in the world, especially in the United States, would keep calling and message and emailing their representatives and senators, asking them to stop this genocide. If they can't stop it, they must stop justifying it and stop voting any weapon shipments to Israel, or stop vetoing any resolution that could lead to an end, not only to the genocide, but to the occupation of Palestinian lands and the suppression of the Palestinians.
Mosab Abu Toha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And thank you again to Mosab Abu Toha for joining us. All right, that's our show. Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to keep the show going and get bonus content. Thanks for watching Useful Idiots. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at usefulidiotspodcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.